Get your guns locked and your fists ready, because these are my top 10 action films of all time. Let's go. Before we get into the top 10 though, I've got some honourable mentions to get into. Honourable mention number 1, it's a film called The Night Comes For Us. This is an amazing action film and I loved every moment of it. It tells the story of this ex-Yakuza enforcer who basically is told to kill all these people, but when he has to kill this little girl who's basically an innocent bystander, he refuses and takes her into safety, and now he is hunted by the rest of the Yakuza empire. This film is probably the most savage, nasty, brutal action film I've seen in a very, very long time. Hand-to-hand, bone-crunching violence. I mean, that's not just like, that's not the main selling point. The action is just visceral and nasty, and that's what I love about this though. But the story is really, really heartfelt as well, where this Yakuza enforcer kind of changes his ways, and he cannot justify killing this little girl. This film is great. If you love just beat to beat, nasty, brutal action, this film is one for you, definitely. If you're a fan of The Raid, I definitely recommend The Night Comes For Us. Honourable mention number 2, you can't go a list without having at least one Arnie film on there, and this one is one of my favourites, and that is Commando. Yep, this one is basically Arnold Schwarzenegger's answer to Rambo in some regard. This film is just encapsulates everything about the macho 80s action star for me. I love it. It's muscle bound. It's, you know, quotable as all hell. I fucking love this film.
Don't disturb my friend. He's dead tired. I told you I'd kill you last.
You told me you could kill me last.
I lied.
It's so delightfully just wacky in its execution and its delivery, but it's just all that action at its finest. The final fight between John Matrix Bennett is just so much fun, and obviously it has to end with one of his most famous one-liners.
Let off some steam, Bennett.
It's so fun, love it. Honourable mention, didn't quite make my top 10, but I couldn't not leave Commando off an action list. My final honourable mentions goes to both Under Siege and Under Siege 2. Say what you will about Steven Seagal, but in the late 80s into the early 90s, he made some pretty damn fun action films, and these two are probably two of his best in my opinion. I really like Under Siege. I think it's a great Die Hard on a warship kind of film. My soft spot, my heart goes to Under Siege 2. I don't know what it is. On paper, it's a terrible film, right? An unrealistic villain with unrealistic plans and plot to gain money and wipe out, the government and overthrow the government kind of thing. But it's a great action movie on a train. I love it. Who says an action movie of this kind of style needs to make sense? It doesn't. It needs to be over the top, stupid, but all fun at the same time. Tommy Lee Jones is in the first one. He's a great villain in the first one as well. Both of these films didn't quite make the cut for me on my top 10, but I feel these are two films. If you're big into your action films, these are some of the best in my opinion, in terms of not quite making my top 10, but they could easily slot in there when my opinion changes. These are just great Seagal movies and great action films to boot. With my honourable mentions out of the way, let's get into number 10. What could it be? It is a Paul Verhoeven movie, and this film just gets better and better after every rewatch for me, and that is the 1999 classic action bug hunt propaganda movie, sort of, Starship Troopers. This film is so much fun. Rewatches from a teenager as an adult. A lot of it's comedy and it's kind of parody elements really come through. Social commentary. It's basically an anti-fascist film. It kind of parodies what life would be if basically we allow a dictatorship to control society. It's basically poking fun at the Nazis and their regime. The book more so did that big time, but the movie does poke fun at that as well. It's just so much fun. I remember I was about 13. This was probably the most violent film I ever saw at the time. Blood everywhere, people getting ripped up by the bugs. The arachnids are just so cool. as the antagonist here. This film has great characters. I love the action in this. It's got some amazing quotable moments in this.
Would you like to know more? Come on, you apes. You want to live forever?
It's so much fun. I rewatched this about maybe 6 months ago and I still had a blast with it. Now, people would say, like, you know, there's got sequels. I wouldn't really say the sequels are worthwhile, but I do want to give the sequels a rewatch because I haven't seen them in years. But Starship Troopers is one of my favourite action films ever, and it keeps getting better on every rewatch. My number 9 is a very recent film that I saw for the very first time about maybe 6 months ago or so. Yeah, this film came out last year and is probably the biggest film of the year when it concerns box office takings. It was a massive, colossal hit. Of course, I'm talking about Top Gun Maverick. Now, this film was not on my radar whatsoever until it started to get 10 out of 10 amazing reviews and making tons of money. I wasn't really bothered about this film back when it came out in the cinema. I don't really like the first film that much. An overly cringy romantic action film that kind of grates on me a bit. Couldn't get into the first one at all. Don't like it. So this one wasn't really on my radar. I stuck it on and wow, this movie blew me away. It's in the conversation for the greatest sequels ever made. Tom Cruise is on top form here. If you go into the behind the scenes of how they made this movie, it's literally a masterclass in Hollywood filmmaking. But the most important thing for me, this tells a compelling and really intriguing story with wonderful characters. This film, in some regards, perfected the Death Star trench run. It's pretty much that. It's pretty much a Death Star trench run as a movie, but obviously it's about these jet fighters trying to take out this, I think it's like a munitions factory, and they've got to do it in a certain time frame before retaliation is sent. But the way this film goes about it is just absolutely fantastic, and that is my number 9, Top Gun Maverick. It is one of the best sequels ever made, and it's going to be one of my favourite action films ever. My number 8. It's a film that I didn't really know how to categorise because it kind of falls into different subgenres of film, but by and large, thinking about it, it is just an 80s action film with a lot of other elements in there, horror, supernatural stuff, a bit of sci-fi as well. Big shout out to Nige over at Rock God 2004 for recommending this movie because it has become one of my favourites from the 80s. The soundtrack's amazing, and that film is called The Wraith. This film is pretty much what you would expect if you got the vibe, the 80s vibe of Top Gun, but you replace the fighter jets with 80s sports cars. It is so much fun. The soundtrack is incredible. The cars all look legitimately awesome. You want to drive all of them. I can't drive, but I still want to drive the cars in this movie. The main protagonist, his car looks like he's straight out of Knight Rider. Is awesome stuff. This film tells a tale of this street gang. They just basically race and they basically rob cars off of people by racing them for pink slips. The main antagonist in this, you hate him so much. It's about this mysterious stranger turning up and basically wiping out each member of this gang one by one, and nobody knows who this guy is and how he's committing these murders of this gang. It's just so compelling. You want to see what's going to happen in the end. You want to see who this person is. It's so good. It is an 80s time capsule of the best kind. The vibe, the cars, the music, everything about this film screams 80s to me. And again, big thanks to Nige over at Rock God 2004 for recommending this one, because me and Soph absolutely love it. And it's in there. It's in my top 10 list of favourite action films of all time. That's The Wraith. My number 7 is about a man who becomes a machine, and it fucking kicks all the kinds of ass. I'm talking about RoboCop. I remember seeing this when I was way too young, and yeah, when Murphy gets murdered by those punks, man, he fucking gets absolutely just mushed to pieces. And it is still one of the most horrific scenes in cinema history for me. It's so raw, it's visceral, it doesn't cut away from it. It is brutal stuff. This film it's just epic in every way. When you get the music kicking in, it's almost like a rock, but it's got that kind of industrial elements in the music. It's just so fucking epic. This film is just great. I can watch this over and over again, never get bored. It's just timeless to me. And who would have thought a film called RoboCop would be a timeless movie from the 80s that everyone remembers and loves? You wouldn't think that. I think when it came out, people were kind of mocking it because it was called RoboCop. But for a film to be called RoboCop and be a straight up adult action film, brutal violence, is such a violent film, this. When Ed 209 malfunctions and he kills that executive. You know, I don't get scared from gun violence too much, but that scene is one of the most violent deaths ever. He just gets absolutely pulped and mulched into nothing. It's brutal stuff. It's got this beautiful heartbeat of the film, this guy trying to find who he once was, and obviously RoboCop is slowly getting visions of who he was and his family, and it's about him trying to figure out, you know, finding himself again and not being just a mindless machine that follows orders. This film is great. The soundtrack is awesome. Just the suit design is just fucking brilliant. The iconic poster as well just says everything you want to know, really. Part man, part machine, all cop. RoboCop is one of the greatest action films ever, and it's pretty much perfect to me. Number 6 is a Japanese classic. I'm saying classic because it's 23 years old this year and it became a cultural phenomenon, and I'm talking about Battle Royale. This film was one of the earliest foreign language movies I saw as a kid, and I was absolutely infatuated by this movie. I love everything about this. The dystopian future where the government don't trust their youth, so they've got to like kind of almost segregate the youth down to one class and send them on an island and tell them you've all got to kill each other until one remains. It's a scary, scary proposal if it happened to us. Could you kill your best friend, for example? It is absolutely terrifying, but this film executes it in such a just grandiose way, kind of almost a surreal way. Fantastically acted. It's brutal as well. This film's violent as fuck. It created a whole cultural phenomenon with the Battle Royale thing. It created a video game subgenre. All these kind of stuff, man, can be traced from Battle Royale. This film is great. From start to finish, it is brilliantly executed. Takeshi Kitano is terrifying in this movie as well. He's a lovable oddball in it. You kind of feel a bit sympathetic for him towards the end, but also he's a terrifying little dickhead as well. So yeah, it's got a great villain, great protagonists. I put it in this action list because I do feel it's more action than anything else. So yeah, that's Battle Royale. Number 5 is another foreign action film, and this is the 2011 Indonesian classic, The Raid. There's been debate whether, you know, do you prefer Raid 1 or Raid 2? I'm always going to pick The Raid, the first film, about this SWAT team basically going onto its drug bust in this apartment building, and all shit fucking breaks loose. Absolutely brutal, violent action in this. Intense, edge of your seat action film that you can just get lost in, just absolutely the viscerality of it. It's fantastic. The choreography in this is just on another level, in my opinion. It's just outstanding. And like some things, you watch some of this violence on screen and you're like, how do they make this look this real? Because it looks real. You feel every fucking strike in this, every stab. There's a bit where a guy gets stabbed in the leg and they drag the knife down the leg and you feel it, man. It's like, it's like this savage. Absolutely savage. I love this movie. You'll be out of breath by the end. It's just fucking just intense, brutal action. Is so good. Number 4 on my list is a recent one that I've kind of thought about and added to my favourites of all time in action, and that is Keanu Reeves in John Wick Chapter 2. Bear in mind, I've not seen John Wick Chapter 4 yet, so as it stands, this is my favourite in the John Wick franchise, and it's also one of my favourite action films of all time. I love how they continued his story with this one, because with the first one was basically he comes out of retirement because a punk killed his dog and stole his car. I didn't know where they could go with the sequel with this one, and I feel like they really built a universe to get lost in with this, you know, this agency of assassins. It's just so well done, and the way they explain this away, that he's made this blood pact and he's broke the blood pact. He's getting assassins going after him. He's got a bounty on his head now. I thought that was great, and seeing scenes of him just annihilating these assassins who come after him. So no one's ready for John Wick. From minute 1, it's just all action. It doesn't waste the time. He goes to retrieve his car that he loses in the first movie. He goes to get it back in the beginning of this one, and it's just all that action for the first like 20 minutes. It's just fucking non-stop. This film is up there with the greatest action films of all time. Keanu Reeves has become a bona fide action star with the John Wick franchise. I love this film, it's fantastic. Coming in at number 3 is a Bruce Lee bona fide martial arts classic, Enter the Dragon. Enter the Dragon has been one of my favourites of all time for a long time. Didn't quite make my top 20 list of all time, but when it concerns action films, this is one of the best. This is like the best James Bond film that isn't a James Bond film. It's about this martial art expert being sent in by British intelligence to basically uncover secrets of this martial arts tournament led by Han. This film is great. From the opening credits to the soundtrack to Bruce Lee himself kicking all kinds of ass. Espionage sequence where he fights all the guards underground is one of the greatest moments in the martial arts cinema history, in my opinion. When he picks up those nunchucks, you see what a master he is in martial arts. The guy is a bona fide legend. He will always be the greatest in martial arts cinematic history to me. The actual one-on-one tournament fights are really fun as well. Great stuff in this. The fight choreography is great. You wouldn't expect anything less where the choreography was done by Bruce Lee himself. There's so many memorable moments in this film. The scene where he's in the room of mirrors and he's got the claw marks in him, goes crazy rage mode. This film is brilliant. It's the greatest martial arts film of all time, and it's one of my favourite martial arts action films ever. So my number 2, the film that created the one man versus all trope. I'm talking about Bruce Willis in Die Hard. This film is just infinitely rewatchable. You know, go and see my top 10 films of all time. It's in there. I don't want to just repeat exactly what I said there, but yeah, this film is infinitely rewatchable. They were able to make just a everyday man, John McClane, into a bona fide action star. I don't think we got quite the same John McClane going forward, but I feel like this is just a great film of an everyman cop going against the odds. This is just absolutely bona fide, one of the greatest of all time action films. It's the most rewatchable action film, and I don't think it will be topped, but it is topped for me. There is one action film better than this in every way. Let's get on to my number 1, but my number 2 is Die Hard. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. We are down to my number 1. And it only could be one film. It could be only one film that has everything encapsulated in it that it's what I want for an action film going to the cinema. It has a great soundtrack. It has a great antagonist. It has a great protagonist. It has a great world building and kind of universe to get sucked into. I am talking about James Cameron's 1986 bona fide fucking classic, guys. Aliens. Like I said in my top 20 films of all time video, this film has everything that I could ever want in a film. In terms of a cinematic perspective, cinematic experience. Like I said, it's got an amazing soundtrack. Ellen Ripley is one of the greatest characters ever. Not just female, she's one of the greatest characters ever in cinema history for me. The Xenomorph is one of the greatest movie monsters of all time. And when you get introduced to the Queen Alien, you know, stuff is being pushed to 11. It's just epic. This film is the greatest action film ever made for me. It is the greatest sequel of all time. What James Cameron was able to do with this film absolutely blows my mind. He took that little seeds that Ridley Scott planted in the first Alien film with the eggs and the chest burster, and he just expanded this whole universe of the alien life cycle. You've got a hive mentality. You've got this Queen Alien. Just amazing expansion to an already established universe, and I just love this to pieces. Everything about this is amazing. Like I said, it is an absolutely bona fide 10 out of 10 example of an action film that is basically pitch perfect in every way. Yeah, I'll never get bored of this film. It is perfection. That's my number 1, Aliens, my favourite action film of all time. So that is it, guys. That is my list and a couple of honourable mentions to boot. Let me know your picks in the comments down below, and how do you fare about my top picks? Let me know down below, and any other action films you think I may have missed in the comments down below. I'm anticipating Where is Terminator 2 in the comments, but I digress. I do like that film, but I just prefer these way more. It's just a personal thing, isn't it? Anyway, guys, that will be it for this video. I will see you next time, I suppose. Bye.